Here we go. Welcome back. It's 2 o'clock Eastern time. Those on the West Coast, maybe you got a little late breakfast or early lunch in on your break, and we're happy to have you all joining us for this next part of the CSLP Summer Symposium. I am Kathy Lancaster. I am the Youth Services Coordinator at the Library of Michigan, but I'm also the current CSLP President for the next 20 some days before my colleague Donna Throckmorton takes over. So welcome to everybody. We're so glad to have you here with us for the summer symposium. Before I introduce Angela, I have some housekeeping to share. A few reminders for those that have been on all day, and then anybody new joining us, that this summer symposium, the recording, the slides, and chat transcripts will be available on our symposium webpage as soon as possible, as soon as we can gather all that and get that up there for you. So you will be able to access that on our CSLP website following this presentation. There's also available now on that site a education credit certificate. So if you need CE hours, just count them up yourself. It is an honor system to fill out that form, and you are able to print it and share with your administration. So there's a quick link in our chat to the Summer Symposium website that one of my colleagues is going to pop in there for you to access all that information and the recordings later on. So we are in webinar mode today. All of your cameras are muted and off. So we have a very large audience. We are encouraging you to use our Q&A in the for any real questions that you have for the presenter. The Q&A is on the bottom toolbar there. And feel free to pop in any questions. We're going to save those, I believe, till the end for Angela to answer. And then in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you should be able to see participants chat, that sort of thing. That's where you can find the Q&A, but you can also find the closed captions. So just click on Show Captions icon if you need to read captions today with us. Attendees are welcome to come in and out all day. Or you can just stay on and wait for our next round, because after Angela, we do have a great webinar on I'm reading the wrong title, Taking the Adventures Outdoors. So programming and partnerships is coming up after Angela. So Angela Hursh leads an outstanding team of marketing and training professionals at Novelist, a company dedicated to helping libraries reach readers. She has also created courses on learnwithnovelist.com designed to help library staff learn how to create effective marketing. She is the author of the blog superlibrarymarketing.com and hosts the YouTube series, The Library Marketing Show. Before her job at Novelist, and I lost my script, of course. live
not a problem.
Person. Before her job at Novelist, Angela led the content marketing team for the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. She has also had more than 20 years of experience as Emmy award-winning broadcast TV journalist. So please welcome Angela as she presents Once Upon an Adventure, practical tips for gathering stories to promote your library.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. Thank you to the CSLP organizers. This is my first time speaking at the Summer Symposium. Earlier today, I'm in Cincinnati. It was like 27 degrees outside. So I woke up this morning going, oh yes, let's talk about summer, because this is going to feel great on a cold day. I am going to put it's like a poll basically into the chat, and I'd love for you to look at it and just respond in the chat if you would with your answer. I'm just curious, no wrong answers here, but if you were to assess right now how your library does when it comes to telling stories, and when I say that, I mean talking about in an interesting way what your library does, who your patrons are, sharing stories of patrons and staff members. Let me know where you think your library is on that in the chat. I'm just curious on all of that. And so let's get started by talking about one of my favorite libraries in the United States. The Pottsboro Library is in a tiny little town in northern Texas. They have a service population of about 2,500 people, which is very small. But I'm here to tell you they may be small, but they are very mighty. And we're going to talk about why they're mighty in just a moment. I want to share some of their successes first before I reveal how they have created these successes. So their director's name is Diane Connery. I've never gotten the chance to meet her in person. I would love to. I don't know if anyone from Pottsboro is here in today's symposium, but Diane has really just stepped it up when it comes to serving her community during the last couple of years. So a couple of things that she's done. First of all, she got Wi-Fi for students right after the pandemic happened. I believe she got a grant, and everybody was home doing their lessons, and she realized the students in her community really needed help with Wi-Fi access, so she got that for them. They also have a community garden where they have patrons growing crops. She also raised thousands of dollars for a new air conditioning and heating system at the library so patrons would have a place to come to escape the inclement weather. But here's the biggest success story. Like many areas, when the pandemic happened, the doctors in Pottsboro and the surrounding areas all went to telehealth. And so many of the town's 2,500 residents don't have internet access, or they lack the bandwidth really for video calls, which I know many of us here on today's call, we can relate to, right? So those patrons would go to the Pottsboro Library, and Diane would let them use her office to do their telemedicine with their doctors, which is very selfless. And also, I don't know where she went to get her work done because people were using her office for their telehealth visits. That's not a very good long-term solution. So she got a grant from the Network of National Library of Medicine's South Central region. And using that grant, then she also asked her community for an additional $5,000, which is a lot for a tiny town like Pottsboro. And what they did with that money, they were able to convert a former junk room in the library into a telehealth space. It has its own outdoor entrance. It has ventilation and lighting. It's even got a doorbell. How did Diane get her community to donate that much money? Diane is a fantastic storyteller. So you and I both know that libraries are important. We know that libraries change lives. We know that libraries do a lot more than circulate books. And I bet you probably believe that your community members really understand the essential nature of your service, but they don't, or at least the majority of them don't. There are plenty of people out there, they may even call themselves fans of your library, but they really don't understand the breadth and depth of your services, and they don't realize how vital or necessary your library is to your community. They have no idea. They've never thought about what would happen if libraries ceased to exist. I heard a quote a couple of years ago at a conference: the only way we can differentiate ourselves is in how we communicate. This quote has never left me, really. I can't remember who said it, but I remember that it has changed the entire way that I think about library marketing, because we do a lot of push promotions in the library world. We try to inform our communities about what our library has to offer. We tell them why they should support the library. We tell them why they should sign up and do summer reading. Honestly, we do a whole lot of talking at people, and I think we end up sounding like every other advertiser out there. Think about how you personally go about interacting with signs and ads and social media. Do you give every message your full attention, or half of your attention, or even a glance? Unless something is seriously compelling, you probably filter it out, and so do your cardholders. But storytelling is one of the best ways to do library marketing, because it's not an ad, it doesn't push. Your community members are going to remember these kinds of promotions because stories make us feel things, and emotions are memorable. Memories of emotional events are often very vivid for most of us. They're more accurate than memories of neutral experiences. For example, I bet you remember more details about your first kiss than you do the first time you brush your teeth, for example. From a neurological standpoint, emotional reactions make things easier to remember because they activate your amygdala and your hippocampus at the same time. The emotion-focused amygdala, helps your hippocampus store memories more effectively. So that's the connection, and it results in stronger memories and people remembering your promotions. A real-life example of this in action was the 2020 election. Both of the two major parties saw an increase in campaign volunteers. The Associated Press Nork Center for Public Affairs Research asked these volunteers about the emotions that motivated them to make phone calls and to go door knocking. And these were the results. Because stories don't just communicate information or elicit an emotional reaction, they are also a tool to persuade and motivate people. And many of those volunteers used stories to try to persuade and motivate people to vote in the way that they wanted them to vote. If you were to ask this guy, his name is Simon Sinek, he would tell you there is a concrete and scientific reason why storytelling marketing inspires people to take action. He created this concept, and it's called the golden circle. And this is how I'm going to do a little explanation of that. So every single organization on the planet knows what they do. This is true no matter how big or small your library is, and no matter what kind of library you work at. Everybody at your library most likely is able to easily describe the services that you provide or the job function that they do within the library system. Libraries also know how they do what they do, and they can usually typically communicate those processes very clearly. Very few libraries, however, articulate the why of what they do. So when Simon talks about the why in the circle, he's not referring to increasing your circulation or increasing your attendance. Those are results. Your why is your purpose, your cause, or your belief. Why does your library exist? Why do you, as a staffer, get out of bed every morning and go to work? And why should anybody care about the work that your library does? The golden circle really rests on the notion that if you tell people why your library does what it does, what its purpose is, why it exists, they'll remember those things and they will be inspired to act. And Sinek uses Apple, the company Apple, as an example in a very popular but also very old TED Talk with really bad audio. So I'm going to play a short clip of that for you anyhow, and I'll let him explain it.
A marketing message from them might sound like this.
Oh, sorry. Can y'all hear that? I was going to jump over in the chat and ask if everybody.
Yes.
Okay.
Make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients.
Sorry.
We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one?
Do you hear the difference in that pitch? So I have heard him do this talk a couple of times. He goes on to say that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I think we're lucky because libraries have a why. It's really a central core of our mission statements. Why do we library? I am actually interested in hearing why you library. I wondered if you could type an answer into the chat and then hit send and let us know if you were asked why you library or why your library libraries, what would you say? I want you to think about that because that is the central place from which all of your marketing should radiate. So let me know what you think in the comments, and then or in the chat, I should say, and then I would encourage you to kind of scroll back up and see what other libraries are saying, what their why is too, because that may trigger some thoughts and brainstorming and some ideas for you when it comes to in terms of marketing. I love how many people are responding to this prompt. This is great, and I can't wait to read them all, but I'm not going to touch it during the next video because I've now learned my lesson. If I look at the chat during the video, it stops the video. Anyway, I see that it's been very easy for you to answer that question, which was my point. We have a why, and we are very lucky in the library world. And summer reading or any large library event or initiative, that is really the best time to be purposeful about storytelling and talking about the why of your library to promote your library. It's also the best time to gather stories that you can use for promotion later in the year. So over the course of the next 45 minutes, we're going to talk about a couple of things. First, we're going to talk about the 4-part structure of a good marketing story. You are going to learn 2 particularly effective types of library marketing stories: patrons as hero and stories of self, with lots of real life examples. So you can start to imagine what this kind of marketing would look like at your library. And my goal is to send you home with lots of ideas about how you can get stories, how you can interview people, and how to get your coworkers to help you with story gathering and storytelling. So the 4-part structure of a very good library marketing story. The story never have to be long. It doesn't have to be complicated. They just have to have the structure, a storyline of some kind, and emotion. So I want you to think about this 4-part story, and maybe there is something that you've been wanting to promote at your library, and as soon as you hear the 4 parts of the story, you're going to realize that thing falls very well into this outline and would make a great story for library marketing. So here are the 4 parts. The characters. You're going to begin by introducing your characters, the people in your story, including your patrons and staff. Who are they? What is their background? What are they wearing during the interview? How do they walk into the room? When you do the interview in a place, what does that place sound like or look like or smell like? All of these tiny details may seem completely irrelevant, but it really helps the reader or the viewer, if you're doing it in video, experience more of the emotion with you. It really makes them feel as if they are there. And describing your characters is a very good way to start a story, particularly if you find you have difficulty writing that first line. Sometimes that empty page can be really intimidating. I do profiles of libraries on my blog, Super Library Marketing, and I often start by describing the person that I'm interviewing, or I ask them a question, which I ask on purpose because I use this to start the story. Tell me about a favorite memory of yours of using the library. It's a great way to help describe that character as I begin the story. So you start with the characters. The second story element is the complication. So your patron, your staff member, whoever you're profiling, what is motivating those people? What problems are they facing, especially problems that seem insurmountable? Describe those problems to your audience. The third element is the turning point. This is the fun part. How is your library able to keep or help your characters to address the complication from point number 2? How are you able to address their pain points and solve their problems? And what is the reaction of the characters to the knowledge that their solutions can be found at the library? And then finally, point number 4 is every story needs a resolution. So spotlight the outcome, the way that your library has changed your community member's life or your staff member or whomever for the better. and do it in a way that allows somebody who's reading or watching that story to imagine that same outcome is possible for them. So the 4 simple elements create an emotional reaction. I should also mention there's a handout that goes with this presentation that has those 4 points on it. I'm sure someone in the chat has told you how to get a hold of that. But if you were like, I'm taking notes really fast, that'll be on the handout. Those 4 points are really all you need to create a great library marketing story. Again, it doesn't have to be complicated. Those are the things that are going to cause that emotional reaction that will allow your audience to remember your story. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you a video. This is a real life library marketing story from a real library. And I want to see if you can spot the 4 elements. And as you spot them, characters, here, let's go backwards, just in case. Characters, complication, the turning point, and the resolution. When you spot them, put what the number is, or you can put the thing, like you can type the resolution into the chat. I'll be watching. See if you can spot the 4 elements.
Start again. Cut. Start again. My mother and father split up when I was about 3. My mother took us, but my dad went and took us back. And when I was about 12 or 13, I was talking to him about my mother, who was never hidden. And I just said to him, you know, do you think you'll ever get back together again? And he said, oh no. He said, Pearl's remarried. And he said, she's got a little boy. Later on, I asked my 2 older sisters, and they hadn't heard about it. They didn't believe it. My eldest daughter, Faye, said to me, let's look for him. Let's really look for him. All right, well, thank you so much for your help. We looked and we were struggling a lot, and that's when I went to the library and Deb helped me. I know Deb's was nearly as excited as me at finding my brother. Actually, I thought he might have passed away because he just didn't exist. I just couldn't find him anywhere. We tried everything. Deb was very determined, and so was I. And Deb came over and said, I've found him.
I received a phone call from my daughter. Very excited. Terrific, Dad, you'll love this. She had to calm down a bit first for me to find out what she was actually talking about. She said, I've got another auntie. That was her words. And she said to me that I am very happy and we're going to meet them.
And then he rang us back that night and said, can we meet in a couple of days?
You just felt like it had always been there. You know, after the first meeting, I walked away and we arranged to meet again.
I feel much happier, more fulfilled, because I found him. Always wanted a brother, and a little brother is better still. It's just great.
All right, everybody did wonderfully. And I loved watching that. And also I loved all the hearts and emotion, right? Or someone's crying. Somebody in the chat said, this is the why of libraries. Exactly. Yeah. So see, and you will remember, I mean, when I put this presentation together, I knew I wanted to include that video. I had seen it and I remembered it because I had the same reaction as many of you. So that's what I'm talking about with emotions and the 4 simple elements. And it doesn't have to be complicated. So I want to also give you a couple more tips on storytelling. One is that you want to make sure that every story that you tell is timely and involves characters that your audience can relate to or care about. Figuring that out can sometimes be difficult for us. So I like to use what I call the chicken test. This is not my idea. Michelle Park-Lizette, we're going to talk about her in a minute. This is her idea, and I use this with every story I write. The chicken test is really a way to create an outline for your story. So you want all the answers in this outline to be yes, but you're going to elaborate on why they are yes. So before you sit down to write a story or write a script for a blog, or write a video script, or write a story for a blog, or even maybe a social media post, you're going to use this chicken test. And it has 5 questions to it. Does the audience care about my chickens? Can my audience see themselves as the chickens? Are the chickens crossing the road now, or are they about to? Does anyone care if the chickens crossed the road 5 years ago? And why does it matter that the chickens are crossing the road? Now, I know this sounds a little obtuse, so we're going to go and I'm going to show you how this might work if you are actually writing a library story. So let's pretend that you want to write a blog post about a 3rd grade girl who was a reluctant reader, but whose skills improved so much during your library summer reading program that she has become a voracious reader now that the school year is here, and she's raising her hand in class all the time to read. So let's go through that with the chicken test. Does my audience care about the chickens? The chickens in this instance is your library helping children develop language skills and literacy. Doing that will build empathy and emotional intelligence. In this section, you could probably think about what statistics can you look up that will support your claims that reading and the summer reading program really helps children and sets them up for success in the future. Can my audience see themselves as the chickens? Many people in your audience for this story are probably have kids who have struggled to read, or perhaps were a child who struggled to read when they were little. Are the chickens crossing the road now, or are they about to? So the girl who thought library programs were boring, the girl in this instance, the girl thinks library programs are fun. She thinks school is boring, and she especially loves reading to the therapy dog. So that is what she's doing. That's her version of crossing the road as a chicken. Does anybody care if we did it 5 years ago? Again, you can put some statistics in here as well. Sometimes when we write a story, we tend to put all of our statistics in one section. And I personally have found it easier to share stories and for them to be more memorable if I sprinkle statistics throughout. So this is another place that you could put statistics about how summer reading has improved maybe literacy at a nearby school. I'm sure you can tie that directly to a school district in your community who has participated in summer reading. And then that last chicken test, what does it matter if the chickens are crossing the road? You can get a quote maybe from the parent about how this whole program has changed their daughter's life. You can get a quote maybe from her teacher. Maybe the teacher was her teacher last year, or saw her struggling a little bit, or was told by her previous year's teacher that she was struggling a little bit and then was surprised when she came back to school and wanted to read. Or you can do both, all of them. So that's really how the outline of the chicken test translates into a library story. Does that make sense to everybody? You can let me know in the chat if you have any questions about that, and we'll catch them and I can answer them at the end. But I want to make sure the chicken test makes sense to everybody. Okay, I'm getting some thumbs up. That's good. I love that y'all know how to use the reaction buttons too. I didn't even have to explain that. You've probably been told that by the CSLP people. Okay, great. Wonderful. So we do the 4 elements, we do the chicken test, and then I have another piece of advice from Michelle Park Lizette. Now, the reason that I became friends with her is because I think she has one of the most difficult writing jobs out there. She is a writer for the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. And I think if anybody can sympathize with bureaucracy, with technical language and sensitive subjects, she is the person to do it. So I like her advice because I feel like it relates a lot to what we do over here in the library marketing world. One day, Michelle was asked to write a story. She has to write a lot of stories. So you can see a quote here on the screen. She was writing a story about somebody who had gotten a loan in order to renovate a bar where they were working. Ask a bartender anywhere to shake up Tom's margarita, and the drink they serve with tequila and agave nectar has its roots here. So she likes to start with a very powerful line. Another example of this, she wrote another story about somebody, a customer who was changing their life by buying the business that they had been working for a long time. There are thousands of ways she could have started that piece, but her opening line was, if Lynn Tatum was staying in this depressing place, she was going to make it better. So I challenge you when you start to write these stories to try and find a great first line, because that is really a hook that keeps people watching or listening. You heard that in the video that we watched previously, and I know you may not know what the first line is going to be going into the process, of putting your video or story together, but it will make itself known to you during the process of interviewing. I promise you, it'll jump out at you right away, organically. All right, so we've talked about the 4-part library marketing story, and I've given you the chicken test and the advice of starting with strong language and a strong first line. Now I want to talk about 2 types of very powerful library marketing stories. My first is patron as hero. So a lot of our library marketing stories put the library at the center of the story, the start of the show, for example. We think people will use the library because it's amazing. The library saves the day, right? But your community members aren't living your library story. They are living their own story. And in your patron story, they are the hero. And that's why these types of stories are so powerful. I have another video to play for you, and this is definitely a patron as hero story. It always takes.
Hi, my name's Mia. I'm 36 years old. I'm a mom with 4 kids. I usually come to Parks Library to attend all the different programs, workshops, and even a volunteer as well. This library become part of our life because our whole family enjoy all the different things happening in this library. I was looking for what can I do with my kids in the community, and straight away I just fall in love with it. Yes, because the staffs, they are super friendly. I actually learned how to communicate with my kids through the librarians, because the way they talk to my kids, I can learn from them. It was very positive and very encouraging, very inspiring. When you talk to them, sometimes make me even feel like tears up, or feel so much joy that I can have someone to share. So, I really love them so much. Even other questions you come up with, like about life or about teaching kids, about what kind of book should I borrow, they can just communicate with you with any other type of questions and whatever you need to know. And even just have friends that very casually ask you, how's your day? I was a mom at home most of the time. I don't have a much connection with other people. After have a baby, I feel hard to talk to the people other than my husband. First will be the language, and second will because I went a little bit blue after having baby. So library was actually a very big step for me to go out of my comfort zone and reconnect to the people outside of my life. The Conversation Cafe is the program that I volunteer for. I get more confident to talk, and I can actually know more people in the community. We actually become friends, and we can even hang out together. I really love the idea that I actually can do something for the people and the place I love so much.
That's it. Pretty easy video, shot with probably with one camera, edited likely in a very simple editing software, no crazy effects. And I can see that many of you are having an emotional reaction to it. And that is a patron as hero example. And here are some others. You don't always have to write a blog post or create a video when you're highlighting your patrons as heroes. Rails Library System, which is in Illinois, does this on their Instagram account. So they have a graphic that they use for these stories, and then they do a quote. And in the caption, they also will tag the person that they're quoting if the person has given them permission to do so. Sometimes they do this anonymously, and it's a really exciting and engaging way to share patron as hero stories on social media and get some organic social media reach, which is always great. The Jacksonville Public Library in Florida created a page. So they have a GED program for their patrons. And instead of just making a page that talks about the program, they profiled someone who had been through it and used a very short story, but a very powerful story about how Samson's life was changed because he went to the library and did the GED program and got his high school diploma, which I think is a great way to promote a program, show how a patron has used it and how it has impacted their life. The second very effective kind of story that you can tell is the story of self. You can use stories from your own life and your own work in the library to lend authenticity to your listeners or readers and just create a connection with them. In fact, your story of self can be a really powerful tool to help others understand and connect to the work that you do at your library. What issues matter to you as a library staffer most in terms of your work? Those issues are not going to be unique to you. Other people are going to care about those same issues. Other cardholders and community members will. And that's common ground for you and your audience. People want to hear why you're passionate about your work. That really builds a genuine relationship with your audience. It makes you feel trustworthy, credible, and somebody that they can approachable when you come into the library. It's probably one of the most magical and effective pieces of any campaign. To prove my point, I'm going to show you. How many of you know Michael, have seen Michael's videos on TikTok or Instagram or Threads, right? Michael's entire social media presence is story of self. He talks about how the library impacted him growing up, why he got into this job. He talks about people that he works with. And I see there's a question in the Q&A. I know I'm not supposed to do this till the end, but somebody's asking, like, how do you tell these stories without violating patron privacy? We're going to talk about that a little later, but Michael's technique is he doesn't identify the person. He calls every one of the people that he works with, all of the customers or patrons in his library, a library friend. So he'll say an adult library friend or a young library friend or a teen library friend, and he can anonymize it because the identity of the person isn't really what matters in his stories. It is the impact that the service his library has provided for them. And so if you have not found Michael, I definitely recommend you find him, TikTok, Reels, or Threads, and follow him, and you'll get a great daily, sometimes more than once a day he posts, examples of story of self. Before I came to Novelist, I worked at the Cincinnati Library, and we had a great story of self. This is Paul Birch. He was the manager at one of our libraries, and he wrote a blog post about an unhoused man who came into the library and at first glance was acting a little bit aggressive, was kind of cranky, was asking for help with some things, and he didn't have a library card, and he needed a library card to do the things he wanted to do. And so Paul was talking about how he was working with this person, being calm and being helpful. And the guy ended up getting on the internet, and we don't watch to see what people are doing on the internet for the most part, so Paul didn't pay attention. And then he didn't see this gentleman for a couple of weeks, and the guy came back in and said, I want to apologize to you. I was just having a really rough time. I was trying to apply for jobs, but because you were so patient and helpful and kind to me, I was able to find a job. And now I'm about to get my own place and find a better way in life. There is a link to this story in your handout. I definitely think you should read it. And I just really loved it. It's a great example of a story of self. And then I have one more example of this that comes from the Addison Public Library. This is also in Illinois. And this is a story of self of a library volunteer who helps with English as a second language and does conversations with people who want to practice English and have English as a second language. Again, this is in your handout. It's a really great story of self. So it doesn't have to just be library staff. It can be volunteers, your trustees, board members, the person who runs your friends group, your foundation. Those are all great stories of self that will help to tell your library story and explain the impact of your library on your community. So we have talked a lot about the kinds of stories and how to put a story together. Let's talk for a moment about how to find and gather these stories. Because quite often when I talk about this with libraries, the part where people get stuck is the collecting of stories. It feels really difficult. And we know that there are staff members out there who are going to be reluctant to do this work, and patrons who might not want to share their story with us, and that is okay. I know this is a bit of a culture shift for libraries. Libraries and their staff, for the most part, we aren't used to really talking about ourselves. It feels a little braggy about our work, but it's important, as we have spent so much time today discussing. And your library will really need as many people as possible to work together to find, gather, and tell these stories that are going to work towards your goal, whatever that goal is for your marketing. Evelyn Shapiro is a good library marketing friend of mine. She's the promotions manager at the Champaign Public Library. She launched a marketing campaign a couple of years ago called A Library for Life, and it features videos of patrons, and they're talking about the relevance and importance of Champaign's library work. And you may be like, okay, how did she put this together? Evelyn told me that the project idea came from a patron who is a parent, who shared comments and stories about the library on her social media posts. And she always tagged the library. She was basically a library influencer. And they didn't pay her. She just did this because she really, really loved the library. So then once Evelyn had kind of formed this idea for a series, she shared her idea with her coworkers. Then a colleague in the children's department introduced Evelyn to an area artist named Stacy Robinson, who was using the study room in the library as his studio, coming in regularly, drawing illustrations for this graphic novel that he was creating. Then their teen librarian introduced Evelyn to a teacher who put together a group of teen interviewees from a nearby school and created a video that turned out to be a really powerful testimony for the library.
I partner with the Champaign Public Library to provide opportunities for our students to grow in their literacy practices. People reading and writing well means that you're set for life. Like that is a strong undercurrent to everything that we do. And I think every bit of success that our kids are going to have. When I first started teaching and I inherited my classroom, there were books that were already in the room. And as I'm going through the books and seeing like, well, what's useful, what's not, what am I keeping, what am I not keeping, I found a copy of Bronx Masquerade. And I started using that in my writing classes as a tool for getting my students to write and talking about voice and talking about telling our own stories. And so when I found out Nikki Grimes was coming here, I was like, oh, I'm gonna be here and I'm bringing some kids. I'm trying to expand horizons, and the library helps me do that. And it's not just about like getting a good book in a kid's hand, but the fact that they are bringing people to Champaign-Urbana that my students would otherwise not interact with blows my mind, and it makes my job so much easier because it means that my kids are being taken care of by the community and not just by us inside that building. It matters a great deal to me that this place be utilized and that people not just see it as the spot where our kids land, you know, after the bell rings at 2:40, but really be an integral part of the work that we do.
So again, a great power.
The reason why we read.
I'm going to go forward because we're almost going to run out of time if we don't start going, but you can see how that worked. That whole idea just kind of cascaded because Evelyn shared it with her staff members, and one by one, they started coming forward with story ideas for her. This is another story that my library at Cincinnati told, and we got this idea from social media. So my social media person was, you know, looking at Twitter like they do during the day, back when Twitter was a thing that we looked at. And he noticed that there was a guy who was tagging the library because he was planning to visit all 41 branches of the Cincinnati Library in one day with his son. And because my social media manager was on the ball and watching for these things, he reached out to this person and he said, hey, When you're done with your adventure, can we interview you? Can you share it, or you feel comfortable with that? And he said, absolutely, I would. So the guy did make it to all 41 branches, took a selfie. In some places, he just like stopped in front of it with his son and took a selfie and kept going. But we got all the selfies, and we interviewed him afterwards about this adventure and turned it into a whole grand story that was on the outside of one of our, or was a cover story of one of our print newsletters that we sent out. So just keep your eyes open for stories, and your coworkers and your patrons are going to help you with gather stories. That first step is going to be to add internal and external promotions. Sometimes we market internally, right? Focus on gathering stories as part of your summer reading promotions. So if you work the front line at your library, you really have the most access to people who make great stories, those library users, for those patrons as hero stories. If you're working in the administration office or in marketing, you're going to be depending on those frontline staffers and volunteers probably to help you. So here's how we get everybody on board with gathering stories. First, we're going to be as specific as possible when you share what you need people to be on the outlook for, and then share details of how they can get those stories to you. If you have some goals, and I certainly hope you do for your storytelling, be sure to share those with your coworkers as well. Explain what all of this is going to mean to them and to the library in general. And if you can, give them an example, maybe from another library, maybe from your own library. Explain how that example was gathered, and then how it was created, and what the end result of that was. And if you need some good examples, you can go to Super Library Marketing. I have lots of them there. Ask your staff some questions every once in a while. What are people who come into the library, what are they struggling with? What brings them joy in the library? How does your job work? How does the patron's job work? All of these questions can lead you to some exceptional stories that you can share during summer reading. And if you're helping a patron and you hear them say something like, oh, that was really helpful, or that was really cool, that is your cue to ask them if they feel comfortable sharing the story. You can ask them. If they don't feel comfortable, that's fine. You're not exploiting their story. If they're comfortable, they're going to tell you, and that's not exploitation. They're probably proud of it. I have a really good example of this. We had a woman who came into the makerspace at the library, and she was using it to kind of set up her business. We had like a lot of different equipment that she was using. We had a teleconferencing area. We had photography so she could take pictures of her products. Some of her products were clothing, so we had sewing machines she was using. We had a vinyl printer, so she was printing a banner for the outside of her store. And the person who used the makerspace was like, hey, would you mind talking a bit about why you're using the makerspace and like what you're doing for your business? And she was so excited. Yes, she's going to share that with them. If you're worried about exploiting somebody with their story, they're going to say no to you. They're not going to want to share it. If they are proud and excited about it, then they'll share it. And you may ask 5 people and only one person says yes, and that's okay. But you just have to ask to find out. And then if they say no, you move on from there. No big deal, right? And we take advantage of that moment when it happens, because if you wait too long, they'll forget about it. Some people have a little bit of a difficult time thinking about how to interview somebody. An interview is a very formal word for this, but just how to ask them questions that are going to create the meat of that story. So I have some tips for you about how to interview someone effectively. The first thing you want to do is build a connection with them. So you might start by sharing a little bit about yourself. You'll want to be prepared for that situation. So you're going to want to kind of maybe write out a couple of questions in advance to ask. But remember, you're having a conversation. So you might want to just go where the conversation leads organically. When you're talking to someone, you don't always know like what you're going to say to them next, but you're listening to them, and then you might ask them follow-up questions based on what they say. Interview is the same thing. It's just a conversation that's on the record, basically. Listening, speaking of which, for really good answers, ask those open-ended questions so that you get those good answers. Be responsive and show that you're really genuinely curious about their answers. Don't forget to always say, is there anything else you just want to add that I didn't think to ask? and get their contact information. So if you have some follow-up questions, you can ask them, and you can send them the story once it's done, and they will likely share it with all of their audience, which gives your library exposure to their groups of friends and followers. Of course, if your patron isn't comfortable directly sharing their story with you, that's okay. As we said, you can ask the patron. Sometimes they only want the experience shared. They don't want their name, and that's totally fine too. We did this at the Cincinnati Library. I wanted to show you this real quick video. I coached my staff to do that exactly. And this is one of the stories where we don't actually identify who the person was, but we actually talk, the staff member talks about the work that he did with this patron and what it resulted in. So here's another great example.
My name is Steve. I'm a reference librarian in the Genealogy and Local History Department at the main library, and you are at the center of everything I do. I'll never forget getting this man's question and thinking there's no way I'm going to be able to get the answer to this one, but I'm happy to report I was wrong. It all started when a customer sent us a photo of a small copper pot. The pot had the date September 26, 1895 on it. The customer wanted our help researching what might have happened in Cincinnati on that date. Using our ProQuest Historical Cincinnati Enquirer newspaper database, to my surprise, I found an article about the 5th Annual Ohio Bankers Association Convention on September 26, 1895, the same date as the one on the pot. The article says that the banquet, the place settings included a miniature model of a colonial fireplace. The article even had a drawing, and it clearly shows a small copper pot like the one the customer was researching. The customer thanked me for my sleuthing efforts. I was just happy to be able to solve the mystery and find a story to go with the artifact.
See, piece of cake. Didn't identify the person, just talked about what happened. 1 minute, 18 seconds, great story. So once you have started finding these stories and putting them out into the world, you're going to want to share those stories and the results with your coworkers in addition to your community. So you might want to showcase them in your staff newsletter, on your intranet. Maybe if you do a video, play it during meetings to show your coworkers that their hard work is making a difference. And of course, your staff and stakeholders aren't the only ones who you can go to find stories. You can directly ask patrons to share their stories through email, maybe a post on social media, a flyer that you slip into holds, or during other patron interactions. I did this at the Cincinnati Library. I sent out one email ahead of Library Lovers Week, I think it's called, in February. And I asked people to share a story about the library, and I got 495 responses back. It's just people like sending me an email. And some of them just like wrote a couple sentences, and some of them wrote what I would consider to be an entire essay. So I had 495 stories to choose from for marketing, and that covered me for like the next 3 years in terms of storytelling. You just have to ask. People love the library, and if you ask them, they're happy to share their stories with you. Los Gatos Library does this on Instagram, and then they share the results of that pledge to them. So you can see that here in that slide. The Bridges Library System also does this in their emails. This is a little pullout from a newsletter that they send out every month. And they just share like a little snippet of a library story that a patron has sent to them. Very easy and effective way to share and gather those stories. I wouldn't be a great storytelling presentation without talking about infographics, which is another way you can share data and stories with your community. I think it's a really great storytelling way to do data. I think writing out data is boring, but an infographic makes it interesting. I would tell you it makes a lot of sense if you're going to go this route to outline the essential things that you want to say, because sometimes we have a lot of statistics and not much space, and we don't want it to get crowded in the design. So we just want to outline those essential points. And then give your infographic a short, catchy title. And there you go. You have a story you can share on all of your tactics, email, social media, in your newsletters, etc. Oh, here's another infographic. I really love this. The Attleboro Public Library, their year in review. So you know how many year in review stats you gather at your library. This is an incredibly easy and effective way to visually share those statistics. and get your community to really understand the impact of your library. So now you have the tools to do more than just promote your summer reading. You're going to inspire, motivate, encourage, and persuade your patrons while they're enjoying your summer reading. And the most important thing I want you to remember from today is you will find success if you make the community and your patrons the hero of your story. The stories that will do the most good for your library in terms of marketing will not be about your library. They're going to be about the people who use your library, like Jerry.
Meet 12-year-old Jerry O'Hara of Marymount. He's not your typical kid. Jerry is a self-described nerd who reads 2 books a week just for the fun of it.
I am definitely an intellectual. I love to read. I'm very klutzy. I'm not the most practical person, but I just love learning.
Jerry gave a speech in school this year about public library funding. He used the library to help him with research. And Jerry says what he learned about the way libraries are funded is concerning.
It mainly comes from the state of Ohio's public library fund, and the money in that public library fund is sadly decreasing, which is leading to a lot of funding cuts in libraries and shifts towards more local sources of funds.
Jerry used his speech to argue for more library funding. He worries about the future of the library if funding is cut because he believes it's a vital part of the community.
It would really affect the future of our generation. Being a generation growing up without a library means we won't know how to really enjoy researching and enjoy walking through the shelves of the library, looking for a good book, and then finding it. The library is definitely very, very important, not just to each person individually, but to the community as a whole.
I'm going to go forward because we're going to run out of time, but right, isn't Jerry the best thing ever? That story came to us because a staff member at a branch phoned me and said, hey, I have this kid here who just came in asking for help researching for this presentation he's doing. And I think you should get down here with the camera because he's great. His dad happened to be there at the same time. So we were able to get permission to get Jerry on camera. So it all happened within like an hour of him walking in the branch. This is the kind of story I hope walks right into your branch during this summer. Hey, listen, we have a new course coming out on Learn with Novelist about how to make your library marketing more inclusive and accessible. I created a code for you. Summer 24 gets you $40 off at checkout. You can learn more at learnwithnovelist.com. I know we have a ton of questions and not much time. So hit me.
All right. Well, thank you, Angela. That was really fabulous. And just a reminder to everyone on, we will have her slides available with all the links along with this recording and chat box on our website as soon as we can get those out. So the first question I have is hidden on me now.
Was it in the Q&A?
It's actually one I answered. Here we go. For written stories, how do you recommend sharing them? Not all libraries have a blog. We can't always get press releases in at the local newspaper.
Yeah. So some social media platforms allow you to do long posts. Like I don't know off the top of my head, but I feel like Facebook's character limit right now is 60,000 characters, which is a huge amount, but you can basically post your story on social media. You can also maybe print it out on a flyer and again, slip it into holds, or maybe you have a display. Maybe there's a book display that's related to the story that you want to tell, and you can just stick some flyers there with your story printed out on that. There are lots of ways to do that. But I think probably for most libraries, social media or a flyer where you can print it. I did a lot of my storytelling in my print, my print newsletter that I sent out every quarter. So you could save some of these stories up and share them that way. I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you. Another question is, what is the best way to reach out to patrons and ask for their stories?
I think email is the best way, quite honestly. Okay. Next to that front desk interaction, because you're having that interaction, the front desk person right there, and you should ask them if they're saying something like, wow, that was amazing, or I didn't know I could do that at the library. That's the moment at which to ask them. But for a mass ask, I think email is the best way.
Great. And I saw you answered already about video editing in Canva.
Yeah.
There's a lot of support for that in the chat as well. So
Yeah.
that's great.
I know people who use iMovie as well. So
Okay.
there's a lot of free editing software out there now because of TikTok and Reels. Thank you, social media.
I think you sort of addressed this. We kind of have a two-part about asking permission and how do you protect their anonymity. Did you have anything more to add to that?
Not really. I just think I know sometimes it feels difficult and weird to ask somebody if you can share their story, and from body language and from the way that they're looking at you, it's going to be easy for you to tell whether this is a question that you should ask them or not. Most people I have asked, and sometimes I've been a little worried if they'll say yes or no, if they think I'm trying to take advantage of them. They will tell you right off. Like if they kind of hedge and they go, I don't know, then you know that you probably shouldn't push that any further. But I'm going to, if I had to guess, 75% of the time when I asked a patron, they were enthusiastically ready to share their stories.
That's great. Definitely pick up on that body language.
Yeah.
How do we apply all this to summer reading with Adventure Begins at your library this year coming up? Any suggestions?
Great question. So I have always thought that summer reading is a twofold storytelling opportunity. First of all, you're going to be doing programs and interacting with kids, kids who may not come into the library during the regular school year. Parents who bring their children in who may not have time during the regular school year to come in and visit the library. Those are opportunities for you to find those stories and then share them about how summer reading is impacting your community. And then it's also a chance for you to gather stories that may not really have anything to do with summer reading, but can be told throughout the rest of the year to continue that knowledge of your community and knowing what the impact of your library is. Partners, we all have sponsors and partnerships for summer reading. You can reach out to your sponsors and partners and ask them why they're sponsoring and ask to tell their story about why they're giving your library money for prizes. That's another great storytelling element that's only available usually during summer reading.
That's wonderful. Somebody else asked, and I think we'll end with this one because of the time, but their marketing is done by their city's marketing department, so they don't have control of that. So how do we encourage them to focus more on the library?
Oh, the city? I think sometimes if you do the work for them, that's really helpful. So I know many libraries who are in that situation, and they will go out and gather the stories, and maybe you don't fully put the story together, but you write like a version of it and you give it to your city and we say, listen, this is a great story that talks about the library and how will it help the city? You know, if you put this on Facebook, it's going to get a lot of organic reach because people are going to love it. They're going to comment on it. That's good for the city and it's good for the library. So do as much of the work for them as you can and then show how your work helps them. I hope that
Awesome,
helps.
Angela. Thank you so much. Everyone give a round of applause for Angela. We really appreciate your time with us today.
I'm so honored to be here. Thank you. And good luck, everybody. Oh, I have to go forward for my contact information. I love hearing from people who've been in my presentation. So when you get your summer reading together, and if you tell a story, or if you tell a story before then, please send it to me. I am always gathering examples of libraries telling story. My email is ahursh@ebsco.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you for all your work that you do for libraries, Angela.
Oh, my pleasure.
Everyone else, we will be back at 3:30 Eastern time. We're going to get outdoors at that time and talk about outdoor programming for Adventure Begins at your library. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you back here in about 25 minutes.
Wonderful. Bye, everybody. Have a great rest of your